Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the University of Massachusetts, Boston, we are honored to celebrate for our Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Living Legacy Award to Hubie Jones. This evening, we have a panel of esteemed guests. Many are former colleagues, friends, students of Hubie Jones, who has been a legend here in the city of Boston, a community activist, a leader, an educator, and a change agent. For Black History Month, we celebrate the lineage and the legacy of those who have paved the way for where we are today. Hubie Jones has paved the way for all Blacks in Boston and beyond to achieve their dreams. Throughout this evening, you will hear about the legacy of Hubie Jones, the people's lives he's impacted, the policies that he's changed, the ways in which he has reflected equity, social justice, inclusion, and fairness in our society. This evening, we'd like to say a special thank you to our co-sponsors, the UMass Boston chapter of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the National Forum for Black Public Administrators, Marcelo Gaston Institute, the Chancellor's Office, the Office of Student Affairs, the Office of Community Partnerships, and the Black Faculty, Staff, and Student Association. My name is Dr. Josephine Cooper. I am the Dr. J. Keith Motley Endowed Chair of Sport Leadership and Administration and the Special Assistant to the Chancellor for Black Life. If it was not for Hubie Jones and his leadership as the former Special Assistant to the Chancellor for Urban Affairs, I would not be in the position that I am today. So I want to personally thank you, Hubie, for your outstanding leadership and for being a trailblazer. Without further ado, I will transition over to the next part of our program this evening, which are recorded remarks from our Chancellor, Marcelo Suarez Orozco.
Good evening. My name is Marcelo Suarez Orozco, and I have the great honor of serving as Chancellor of the University of Massachusetts, Boston. I am honored to be invited to say a few words in this wonderful recognition of Hubie Jones for his advocacy and long and deep commitment to leading positive change on many important fronts here in our city of Boston. I am so pleased that the UMass Boston chapter of the NAACP is recognizing Huby with the Martin Luther King Jr. Living Legacy Award. Although I have not yet had the good fortune to personally meet Mr. Jones, from what I have learned of his tremendous service, I feel there is no one more deserving of this honor today than Mr. Jones. As Chancellor, I consider Hubie to be one of our own for his exceptional service at UMass Boston from 1995 to 2002, when he served as the Special Assistant to the Chancellor for Urban Affairs. His work at our university served to strengthen our ties with our surrounding communities in furtherance of our commitment to stand with the city of Boston. Hubie's contributions, however, extend far beyond his time here with us at UMass. Indeed, for more than 45 years, he helped to shape and define the civic and social landscape of Boston in leadership positions, building and rebuilding community organizations in Boston's Black community and in the neighborhoods across the city. Throughout his long, exemplary career, Hubie was a fierce advocate for education, working to expand opportunities for children with physical and mental disabilities, children who had behavioral issues, did not speak English as a first language, or were pregnant. His work led to the groundbreaking enactments of two landmark laws in Massachusetts, the Special Education Law and the Bilingual Education Law, to protect the rights and to give appropriate educational services and instructions to special needs children, to all our children. I am sure over the course of this evening, Huby's many other contributions, too many for me to mention now in this brief introduction, will be recognized. But I do want to take the opportunity to congratulate Huby on his founding of the Boston's Children's Chorus in 2002. It is an exceptional example of his creative approach to providing opportunities for young people from diverse ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds, showcasing their talents to audiences across the city. Congratulations, Huby, on a very well-deserved recognition for your exemplary service. In closing, please be safe and stay well. Thank you.
My name is Tim Sieber. I'm a long-term faculty member at UMass Boston. I've been there since the 1970s. I know all of us taking part in this event tonight are deeply grateful to Huby Jones for inspiring us all to reach for the most hopeful standards in our collective work together to create and sustain justice in our communities, at whatever level we might be working. Surely this is what led him to be a principal figure in the creation of more than 30 different nonprofit organizations in our region, many of them aimed at improving the well-being of our children, from the Mass Advocacy Center to the Boston Children's Chorus, and whose work has been fundamental in securing historic breakthroughs in inclusion of English language learners and young people with disabilities in the promise of education. Huby has also been an important figure in so many institutions of higher education in our region, including, of course, Boston University, Roxbury Community College, MIT, and, last but not least, UMass Boston. As long ago as 1980, when I first met Huby here, when, as Director of Urban Studies and with the guidance of the late psychologist Dr. Bernie Kramer, we invited him to campus to offer a public lecture on racial justice in the city, he graciously accepted. He has continued to be an inspiring mentor ever afterward to me and many of my colleagues. In 2001, he inspired my colleague Esther Kingston Mann and I to write our book, Achieving Against the Odds: How Academics Become Teachers of Diverse Students. noting on our book cover that, ironically, but not surprisingly, it was in a public urban university, the home of non-elites, as he put it, that educators dared to make the classroom a microcosm of the kind of multicultural, multiracial society we should seek to create in America. Later, he encouraged us to write and publish our 2011 book, Transforming Classroom Culture, Inclusive Pedagogical Practices, and wrote in the book's foreword of his startling vision for all that education can accomplish. He said, "It can help one truly to become a fully educated person who appreciates the cultural gifts of all people and knows how to weave them into a rich mosaic in a beloved community." Of course, it's possible to build such a beloved community in a classroom, a university, and in the ties between a university and its neighborhood, as he led our campus to do with the creation of the Columbia Point Community Partnership when he was Special Assistant on Urban Affairs to Chancellor Sherry Penny in the late 1990s, one of his many achievements in that role. Thank you so much, Huby, for your patient inspiration for all of us who have needed and benefited so much from your long-term support, and for your always being the humble, effective organizer behind the scenes, encouraging us all to imagine we can reach even higher ground in our struggles to create those beloved communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that event occasion, Dr. Tim Siever. Next up, we will have our introduction of 3 speakers who will be giving honors to our esteemed honoree this evening, Mr. Hubie Jones, Dr. Larry Brown, followed by Mr. Alan Kazai, and followed by Mr. Ron Ankrum. Dr. Larry Brown.
Well, I have to start by saying that Hubie Jones has been the single most influential person in my entire professional life. We first met in 1968, so forget about 45 years, that's over 50 years ago. I returned from the Peace Corps in India and entered Brandeis University for my PhD studies. But I was a mess. In 2 years in India, I had seen incredibly dire poverty, the legacy of colonialism and caste. And while there, I also was a long distance witness to the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy. So I arrived in Boston ready to go to war with my own country. Even I tried to settle into my academic studies. Around that time, Huby needed a volunteer at Roxbury Multi-Service Center to help with record keeping. I volunteered, but I knew nothing about record keeping. In our initial meetings, I quickly fell under the influence of Huby. And luckily, I would be among the very first of his hundreds of mentees over the years. Huby never admonished my anger at racism and injustice, but he channeled it, moving me from an SDS flamethrower to the kind of professional that I had never wanted to be. And even though I was only 27 years old at the time, I think Huby had a suspicion that I probably could do better things in record keeping. He was creating the task force on children out of school to find out why so many children in Boston were being excluded from an education. And while he recruited a prominent group of community activists, psychiatrists, educators, and business people to serve on the task force, Huby didn't have the money to hire a director. So he appointed me. My salary was zip, but I relished the role and he helped me grow in it. The research that we did and the hearings that we held and the report that we wrote called The Way We Go to School generated city newspaper headlines and hit the media like a thunderbolt. Boston schools were denying more than 10,000 children the chance to get an education because they didn't speak English, they were physically handicapped, or they had mental health needs. But because Huby's Huby, we then notified the media that we were not done. We would stay on the case until needed reforms were made. And very quickly, we got the first statewide bilingual education bill passed in the country. And a year later, we got Chapter 766, the special education law that exists today and is the model for the current national law. In 1974, we also became deeply involved in the desegregation of the Boston schools. Our attorneys, Tom Mila and Julian Houston, who later became a judge, sued Boston for its high rate of expulsions of Black male students. Within a year or so, we received Ford Foundation funding, and the task force became what is known as the Massachusetts Advocates for Children, the first statewide child advocacy organization in the country. Marion Wright Edelman then adopted our state model to create the National Children's Defense Fund, on whose board I was a founding member. While I went off in other directions in life, Huby's legacy in Boston soared as premier organization creator, institution repairer, and leadership maker of mentees. Huby's beloved father was a Pullman coach porter who never would know what his son had become. But the lesson is that we would not know what else his father would have become had he had the same opportunities in life that he was to provide Huby. Huby and I have stayed in constant touch for more than 50 years. His phone number remains etched in my memory, and my devotion to his lovely Kathy and the kids remains strong. Above all, I remain grateful to my mentor, Huby Jones. Huby, your role in my life is most treasured, and I'm forever grateful.
Next up, we will have Mr. Alan Kazai.
Good evening. I am so honored to add my voice to this wonderful chorus that is celebrating the remarkable Huby Jones. Like Larry, who I've gotten to befriend and know thanks to Huby, Huby is my #1 mentor, an ongoing moral touchstone, a social justice inspiration, and an extraordinary blessing in my life. You've profoundly changed my life in 1,000 ways, large and small, and I will be forever grateful. I knew about Huby long before I met him. One of my favorite things during high school and college, and I see Marjorie here, was to watch 5 on 5 with my dad on Sunday mornings. And what struck me about Huby was not just the powerful arguments that he would make for the things he believed in, but every single point he made was grounded with a moral center and a social justice touchdown. So when we were starting City Year, Michael Brown, Jennifer Eplett-Riley, Neil Silverson, and I made a list of the top people in Boston we wanted to try to get behind our effort. And Huby, you were at the top of the list, but we didn't know him. So we had recently graduated from school. So we said, you know what? He's a dean. He must have office hours. So we just signed up for an appointment. We took the last appointment, hoping we'd get a little more time. So Neil Silverson and I walked in, I'll never forget this, in the fall of 1987. At the end of the day, we walked in a little sheepishly. Huby looked at us and he said, wait a minute, you don't go to school here. What are you doing here? And we started talking really fast and nervously. Well, we just graduated from school and we have this idea. We want to change the world and we need your help. It's going to be an urban Peace Corps. I'll never forget this. Huby stopped. He looked us in the eye. He said, slow down. You have my attention. Let's talk. And he proceeded to spend the next 2 hours with us, schooling us on the history of Boston, the racial strife, the challenges, who we had to make sure we touched base with, who we could get behind us. And he committed right then and there to do everything he could to help us. And that really was the beginning of City Year. We went in with an idea. We came out with a program and a strategy. And I personally gained a lifelong champion and mentor and dear friend. Huby is one of those extraordinary mentors who knows you need to see him even before you do. I'll never forget in April of 1992, when you called me up, Huby, and you said, Alan, I want to take you and Michael to lunch. I have something important to talk to you about. And I said, well, what do you want to talk about? Because I wanted to get prepared. He said, I'll tell you at lunch. So we scheduled it for the next week. After checking in with us, Michael and I, as to how we were doing, Huby said, okay, here's the deal. Bill Clinton is going to be the next president of the United States. He was very moved by his visit to City Year. He believes in national service. After he gets elected, he's going to call you guys and ask for your help to design and build his national service program. And you aren't ready for that phone call. You have to make it your number one priority to get ready. Now, in April of 1992, Bill Clinton was third in the polls behind Ross Perot and George H.W. Bush, not first. But as usual, Hubie was right. We left that lunch, Michael and I cleared our schedule, and we made it our number one priority, checking in regularly with Hubie how to get ready. And we got that phone call in November, even before President Clinton took office. And thanks to Hubie, we were ready. I'll never forget that. I could go on and on about what I've learned from Hubie. I'll just want to say one more story. Because of the times we're in and the ongoing struggle for racial and social justice. It was June of 2003. The AmeriCorps program got an 80% funding cut overnight because of partisan politics. We organized this big effort to save it. We finally got a vote in the Congress. And we thought we were going to win, and we lost that vote. And everybody wanted to give up. And then we came up with this idea. People thought it was crazy to do 100 hours of round-the-clock testimony inside Capitol Hill to show the devastation of the cuts in front of the Congress. So I went to see my number one mentor, Hubie, and said, Hubie, what should we do? I'll never forget, he said to me, Alan, in all my struggles for social justice, here's what I've learned. At every defeat, you have to double down. You have to come back stronger. You have to make it clear you are never going to give in. And that's how you win. And we did the 100 hours and we won, and we got a $100 million increase. Hubie, you have spent your life fighting for social justice. You've had many victories. You've also had some defeats. You have always doubled down. You have always come back stronger. You have always built the coalition, and you have won. And because of your leadership, Boston, our state, our country, and our world have changed profoundly and will never be the same. I am so deeply grateful to you. You're an incredible blessing in my life. I wouldn't be who I am without you, and your ongoing guidance to this day, and City Year would never have happened without you. Thank you, my dear friend. I love you deeply.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. Ron Ankrel.
Good evening. This is Ron, and I want to thank you for this invitation to be here. I'm honored to be on this list of speakers. Like everyone else, Hubie has been a major impact on my life, both as a mentor and as a friend. I can tell you when I first met Hubie, he was interim president at Roxbury Community College. He was looking for someone to hire as a consultant to help him with the admissions and the enrollment management area. Fortunately, I was recommended to him from a dear friend, Marilyn Anderson Chase. But as you can imagine, I was very nervous to go see Hubie. As it's been pointed out, Hubie is bigger than life. And if you haven't met him, this was my first meeting with him. You're a little nervous about it, but he calms you down and offered me this opportunity that I will never regret. Being at RCC was important as someone who'd worked in higher ed, because you knew as an institution how important it was to the city of Boston. We were there to bridge the gap before the new president, and we were there to help turn it around. What made this also very special was when Hubie had to return back to Boston University, he recommended that I take over as interim president to close the gap before the new president started. That gave me 2 months to play president, an opportunity that very rare, but really, really appreciated it. And from that point on, Hubie and I have been attached. I can tell you a story of being with him on the City to City tour, an initiative started by Hubie. And I was on the Chicago trip. I was standing next to Hubie as we were listening to this great choir that was singing. They were just wonderful. And I was admiring it as a person who studied music, really in awe of this choir. I'm sure David will talk more about that experience. But for me, it was Hubie saying, I'm going to start one of these in Boston. Well, what Hubie was trying to do was not just start another choir, a children's choir, but he basically said they will be the ambassadors for the city to show the diversity of this place. His vision was so much bigger than that, than just a choir. And to watch him go from an idea, a vision, to actually creating something to grow into what it has was just amazing. I was also inspired by the City to City group because when I went to work in Springfield, with the help of the Federal Reserve Bank, I was able to start a City to City Greater Springfield, and we took trips to other cities around the country just as well. My last little story is to talk about my time going to Boston College to work in the School of Social Work as faculty. Huby was one of my references for the job. And when I went for my interview with the dean of the school there, he was so impressed by the fact that I got a reference from Huby. I'm sure that he really didn't look at all at my credentials. That was all that it took really to get the job. But it was one of the best jobs I had ever had. And teaching at Boston College was just amazing. I'm now retired from that position and live in Charlotte, North Carolina. So what I learned from Huby, these 4 things. If it's not working, fix it. There's no reason to be in a city where things aren't working, where your responsibility is to make sure that you take it apart and rebuild it the right way. Second thing, you put people first. What I mean by that is listen to what people who need the services want, not what you think they need. You have to make sure that you are addressing their needs. Third thing is integrity means everything. You have to be honest. You have to basically tell the truth and be really open to listening and understanding that when you hear the truth, that you're also paying attention to it. And the last thing, as I'm retired, Huby said to me when we were walking one day down the street, I asked him, how do you keep going, Huby? How do you keep doing this stuff? You know, he's after more than 80 years old at this point. And Huby said, keep moving, stay active. And so that's my mantra right now. I try to keep moving. I try to stay active. I continue to give back to the community as much as I can. So Huby, I hope I have lived up to your expectations of me. Secondly, I appreciate you more than you can ever, ever, ever imagine. You've been in my life the whole time. So I want to thank you as a friend and as a mentor. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry, Alan, and Ron. As we can see and hear, Dean Jones' impact and legacy extends far and wide, and we're just getting started. Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Andres Holder for a special tribute for Dean Jones.
Thank you for the introduction. Hello, my name is Andres Holder, and I am the new Executive Director for Boston Children's Chorus. I am so thrilled to have joined this organization, and I feel like I stand on the shoulders of giants. I will not bore you with my commentary, and I'll let you listen to Boston Children's Chorus singers because they say it best. So here we go.
Good evening, I'm Robbie Jacobs, Director of Artistic Programming for Boston Children's Chorus, and I'd like to pass on the thanks of everyone at BCC for the opportunity to honour our founder, Huby Jones, at this beautiful event. Huby dreamt up Boston Children's Chorus 18 years ago, and since then, thanks to his inspiration, vision, and drive, thousands of children have experienced the transformative power of singing, and our choirs have performed across the city, the country, and the world. We're excited to share with you an excerpt from our Dr. Martin Luther King tribute concert. This song, Underdog, by Alicia Keys, was performed and recorded by each singer separately in their homes and edited together to make a virtual choir. Thank you very much.
She was walking in the street, looked up and noticed he was nameless. They said I would never make it, but I was built to break the mold. The only dream that I've been chasing is my own. So I sing a song for the hustlers waiting at the bus stop, single mothers waiting on a check to come, young teachers, student doctors, people on the front line knowing they don't get to run. This goes out to the underdog. Keep on keeping at what you love, and you'll find that someday, soon enough, you will rise up, yeah, you will rise up, rise up. Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. We're gonna rise up. I sing a song for the hustlers waiting at the bus stop, single mothers waiting on a check to come, young teachers, student doctors, people on the front line knowing they don't get to run. This goes out to the underdog. Keep on keeping at what you love, and you'll find that someday, soon enough, you will rise up, yeah. Umare, 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 umare. Dun 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 rise up, rise up.
Outstanding, outstanding, outstanding. Want to thank you, Mr. Andreas Holder and the Boston Children's Choir for that special tribute. Dean Jones is unquestionably a champion for the underdog because of his leadership, his courage, his sacrifice, his conviction. Not only can those who have been historically underserved rise up, but they can also lift others up with them. Thank you very much. Next up, we have former Vice Chancellor Charlie Titus, Ms. Margie Aarons-Barron, and Dr. David House, who will also be sharing their special tributes. Vice Chancellor Titus.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper. Good evening, everyone. It's a tremendous honor for me to be here. Andreas, that was wonderful. Another one of Huby's marks on our city, just terrific. You know, as I thought about tonight, I was thinking about one word that best described Huby for me. And so what I came up with was friend, mentor, educator, activist, initiator, architect, organizer, manager, administrator, of course, husband, father, grandfather. And Alan, you guys got it right, social justice entrepreneur and resident. His impact on this city has been outstanding. And I think to understand a little bit of how Huby got here and what drives him, I want to take a quick look at his history. So Huby's a native New Yorker. I've never held it against him. I don't think anybody in Boston has either. You know, there are people who have said, if you're not from Boston, it's extremely hard to get tenure here, particularly in the political and social service area. Huby has dispelled that myth without a doubt. He drew inspiration, obviously, from his parents. He watched his mother get a high school degree, a BA, and a master's degree after raising her family. His father was a Pullman porter, and he watched his father organize Pullman Porters Union along with A. Philip Randolph. That's part of his history. In a 204 essay for the New England Journal of Public Policy, Huby wrote, "Family and community are human organisms that are the bedrock of any society. They provide the sustenance, values, direction, and protection that make it possible for individuals who live in a defined location to prosper and thrive singularly and collectively. Community is the social structure that mediates between the individual resident and the state and the private elites, guiding social transactions between these different worlds to advance and protect the interests and needs of individuals and groups within neighborhoods and local communities. Following that, Huby has, as we've heard, been the founder or rebuilder of over 40 organizations in the Boston community. I first heard of Huby, and he didn't know me, but I was a 15-year-old living on Mayberry Street, which was around the corner from the Roxbury Multi-Service Center in 1965. Now, I grew up in Roxbury. I've been born and raised, and as a youngster, one of the things that we all reveled in were the neighborhood houses, and that's where we got our services. There were neighborhood houses, the Dorchester House, the Little House, the Dennison House, the United Southland Settlements, and so forth and so on, and that's where we went. And all of a sudden, here comes this agency called the Roxbury Multi-Service Center. It was different. It was different than all of the neighborhood houses. It had a new way of doing business, and it provided a wide range of social services. One of the things that I remember hearing women talk about in those days, that it was a place to go to get help to negotiate a very degrading state welfare system, and to sort of understand how to get through that system without being degraded. That was so impactful in our community in those days and so much needed. I sort of lost touch with Huby a little bit. I went off to college, and when I came back, my next encounter with Huby was when he came to UMass Boston, actually, as a special assistant to the Chancellor for urban programs and urban development. You heard Professor Siebert talk earlier about the Columbia Point Community Partnership that he built for UMass Boston. You heard Ron Ankrum talk about the City to City program that he started while he was there. They tell me I only got 30 seconds left. I'm sorry, I'm going over because I got some more stuff to say. So that's just, you're gonna have to bear with me, all right? The other impact in his life, in his earlier life, came from Dr. Kenneth Clark. Very important man in this country. He was a professor of Huby's at CCNY, and his work, his psychological work between Black and white children actually formed the basis to help win the Supreme Court decision of Brown versus Board of Education. I'm going to tell you about two calls I got from Huby. The first one, Huby was at RCC, and he called me and he said, "Can you come over? I want to chat." And I went over and he said, "Look, as president of RCC, one of my responsibilities is his athletic program. And I don't know a whole lot about athletic programs, so I need your help." And we spent about 4 hours that day talking about the athletic program at Roxbury Community College, the difference between the Reggie Lewis Center as a community space and a use by the athletic department and the athletic programs here. The second call I got, I'm going to tell you about in 2010, Huby called me and he said, "I want to come over to the university and have a chat with you. I need some help." So knowing Huby, I figured we ought to garner some of the university's resources. I called the chancellor and said, "Look, I need Steve Neville, your special assistant, to sit in this meeting with Huby and I." So Huby comes in and Stephen and I there, we're ready. And he says, "Who's this?" And I said, "It's Stephen Neville, the chancellor's assistant. Want to make sure you get what you need." He said, "All I need is you. I want you to sit on the board of a new organization I'm forming." I said, "Oh, okay." That organization turned out to be Boston's Higher Ground. I became a founding board member. And he put together one of the most powerful boards, I think, of a social service agency in the city. Charlotte Gola-Ritchie, the very talented Charlotte Gola-Ritchie, was our founding board chair. When she decided to run for mayor, I think Huby orchestrated this, but I became the chair of the board and I've been the chair since. It is an organization that is a convener of partners to have collective impact on the lives of people in organizations in our communities. It has become a very powerful organization that is working with the Boston Public Schools. And one of my goals is to make sure, because I think this might be Huby's last one, I want to make sure it's his best. And that's saying a whole lot, given the organizations that he's founded and what they've done in this city. So that's my goal. Huby, I thank you for your friendship. I thank you for your mentorship. I heard Alan talk about those lunches, and I bet Alan those lunches were at Huby's favorite restaurant at the Copley. I've been there for those lunches where I've been told and mentored and guided, and I cherish those remembrances and those times. Huby, thank you for all you've done for the city and for all those people that you've mentored, including myself. Love you, man.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Titus. Outstanding. Next up, Mrs. Margie Aarons Barron.
I was just going, what you didn't hear me say was, Charlie, you got to go to the Copley for lunch with Huby. The last place Huby and I had lunch was at the Roxy Diner in Newtonville. Anyway, Huby and I have known each other since 1979. We came together every week, probably over 1,000 weeks, in the context of one of Huby's most prominent and different activities as a panelist on Channel 5's long-running Sunday morning public affairs program, 5 on 5, an institution in Massachusetts. For 20 years, I produced 5 on 5, often hosted it, and returned as a panelist after I left the station. Huby was a natural fit for that group, which over time included folks like John Kerry, Mitt Romney, former New Hampshire Governor Steve Merrill, Flash Wiley, Micho Spring, Doris Kearns Goodwin. Now, you all can appreciate that Huby had an opinion on just about everything, and automatic deference toward just about nothing. At the heart of the show were Huby's weekly jousts with Avi Nelson. It was political theater at its finest, with a very serious core. Avi would articulately, and Huby would say wrongly, lay out the conservative or libertarian position on an issue. And Huby, with an all-knowing smile on his face, would just say, Avi, 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 let's be clear, okay? And then he'd set out the facts about underserved children, underfunded social services, underestimated grassroots organizing. Whatever was under, Huby was there to lift it up. Over the years, I've turned to Huby when I needed to touch base, verify, check my instincts. His has been the voice of constancy, the voice of a true friend. No matter what's going on in his own life, Huby has always got time to save the world. As someone else once reflected on him, if Huby sees you coming down the street, he sees you either as someone who needs to be saved or as someone who can help someone who needs to be saved. And when Huby starts a sentence with look or listen, and that's almost always watch out, when I hear that, I know he's going to set me straight. Huby's imagination knows no bounds when it comes to social healing. In the 1990s, he participated in programs run by International Boston and the Atlantic Rim Network. He heard about how other cities had best practices in building diversity. He came up with the City to City program that was a source of pride for the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. He's a philosopher and a doer, even if the idea isn't precisely in his wheelhouse. I remember one evening with Kathy and Huby at our dining room table, when Huby shared with me what he had felt at the dedication of the Lenny Zakem Bunker Hill Bridge. And yes, I'm deliberately using the names of both ends of the bridge because its symbolism wasn't lost on Huby, especially when he saw people from all backgrounds come together in tribute to a young man who had dedicated his short life to civil rights and fighting injustice. As you heard from Ron, Huby listened to children's choruses from elsewhere and decided Boston should have its own chorus to bring children from different backgrounds together to strengthen its social fabric. The very next year, the Boston Children's Chorus was born, and you'll hear more about that from its wonderful founding executive director, David Howes. I'd also like to add a word about a very special person who's not with us today, who adored Huby, admired him, and depended on him as she served as chancellor of this great institution. Sherry Penny, who died with her husband, Jim Livingston, less than 2 years ago in a tragic accident, founded the Emerging Leaders Program in the Center for Collaborative Leadership at UMass Boston. It was the first leadership program of its kind in the city. For several years, as you also heard, Hubie had been her special advisor on urban affairs. The wisdom he provided her, the spirit and the mission she incorporated into that center live on as yet another expression of the essence of Hubie Jones. Identify the need, conceptualize the mission, breathe reality into the design, and inspire and guide young people to fulfill the social justice dream. If that isn't the spirit of the Martin Luther King legacy and its expression in Hubie Jones, I don't know what is. But of course, it is that dream. The dream endures, and for his role in making it happen, I am so proud of my dear friend, Hubie Jones.
Thank you, Mrs. Barron. Next up, we will have Mr. David C. House.
It is a great pleasure to be with you all this evening and an incredible honor to share a few personal thoughts about a man for whom I have the utmost respect and admiration. Many of you know that I joined the small team of the Boston Children's Chorus, overly confident, woefully underprepared, and quite distant from the challenges of this great city. But when I met Hubie in 2004, in many ways, my professional career took flight. In spite of my inexperience and my musical background, no arts administration background, but my musical background, Hubie looked at me, and I will always remember that day. And he said to me in his Hubie voice, "You're going to be a leader." And of course, I smiled and nodded, but had no real understanding of what he meant and why he thought so. But that day, he claimed my leadership, and he went to work in the way that only Hubie can to ensure my success. He took me under his wing, and we were off. Well, that was 17 years ago, and there, under his wing, I remained tucked away, listening deeply, watching closely, and following happily a great visionary, a great leader, and a compassionate human being. But let me pause to make a note of his wingspan. Like the albatross, it extends far and wide. And I learned very early on that I was not the only one tucked under that wing, but more on that in a second. I can recall with great fondness our many travels around the world with the Boston Children's Chorus. But it was on a trip to New York City to visit the Young People's Chorus of New York City when we were walking down the street and people were screaming, "Hubie, Mr. Jones." And then when we were in Chicago having lunch and people interrupting, coming over to the table, "Hi, Hubie." I was like, who is this man? Like, this was very early on. I didn't know 5 on 5 Margie. And so I didn't know this Hubie Jones guy that everybody was so excited about. But I know many of you have tried to have a lunch with Hubie in the city of Boston. You can forget it. I actually now allocate extra time for all the interruptions that one might experience as we are having Hubie. So to say that his wingspan is wide and large is a gross understatement. For those lucky enough, like I and many on this call, to have been taken into his care, we know that he would never kick us out of the nest. But I believe, and it seems that his goal was to allow us to soar. And in my last few thoughts, I just wanted to share the following. I love Hubie because he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. His vision for me, his vision for a better city, it's extraordinary. And I and the city are better for it. I love Hubie because he's one of my greatest champions, and he never fails to tell the truth. And that's truly a gift. And I love Hubie because he refuses to let me fail, always offering advice. I remember he told me to take the high road, and it's not the advice I wanted in that moment. I was quite angry, but he said, take the high road. And, you know, that's made such a big difference in my career. He often told me to punch above my weight. Hubie, you taught me to aim higher, to fly higher. And you always remind us that service is the rent that we pay to live on this earth. And you, young man, have paid that rent tenfold, and you keep paying, right? And you've taught all of us to do the same. And we are better because you are in our lives. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for believing in this city, and thank you for believing in our common humanity. I love you, Hubie, and I will be forever indebted to you and always tucked comfortably under your wing.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Titus, Mrs. Barron, and Mr. House. Outstanding tributes to honorable legend. Next up, we will have a special music presentation from Professor Dennis Montgomery III, Voice of Victory.
Who do I turn to? Where do I go? Abused and all alone, oh no. Stuck in this hole, so blind I can't see. Somebody please help me. I know you're gonna make it, though times are hard, yeah. Victory lives inside you, and that's who you are. Up from the ashes, I will rise. I am the voice of victory. I lift my head up to the sky. Oh, yes, it is. This pain is also heavy. I can't say a word. It's hidden deep inside me. My voice can't be heard. Go ahead and tell your story. You're not alone. This is your testimony. Stand up, be strong, up from the ashes. I will rise. I am the voice of victory, yeah. I lift my head up to the sky. My name is Victory. Oh, yes it is. Up from the ashes, I will rise. I lift my head up to the sky. My name is Victory. Oh, up from the ashes, I will rise. I lift my head up to the sky. My name is Victory. Oh, yes it is. My name, your name, our name. Won't you sing with me? Your name, our name is Victory, yeah. I've got it, you've got it. You know, we've got the victory. We've been made into the night, but joy, joy, joy is gonna come in the morning. God, God, the victory. No doubt in my mind, no doubt in my mind. I've got it, you've got it, we've got it. My name is Victory. My name is Victory. Our name is Victory. I know who I am. Oh, yeah. My name is Victory. I know. No doubt in my mind. No doubt in my mind. You gotta believe it, receive it, believe it. No doubt, no doubt, no doubt, no doubt in my mind. I know who I am. I know who I am. You got the victory. I got the victory. Oh, my name is Victory. Yes, it is.
Thank you, Professor Dennis Montgomery III, for that special tribute.
Thank you.
Before our award presentation by one of our outstanding students, Ms. Kamaya Parkin, we will have a special tribute from Mrs. Esther Kingston Mann.
I want to speak in a really personal way about Hubie, because I'd like to tell him some things that I think I've never told him before, which is that he was one of the people that that helped me to stay on at UMass Boston. My background is working class, and my parents were immigrants who had no formal schooling. So that experience really stays with you no matter what your status becomes later on. So I was always like a stranger in the world of academia. Wasn't my world. And so a lot of my history at UMass Boston had to do with all the problems that arise when you don't understand the rules of the game in the place that you've come to. I first met Hubie several decades ago when I was much, much younger, obviously. It was a time when UMass Boston was in the process of developing a deeper practical commitment to fostering the education of diverse students. And as part of that process, I worked with other faculty to create an awards program that encouraged undergraduate students to become researchers. That is, producers of knowledge in addition to their customary role as students who are consumers of knowledge. Because I was always something of a radical, a lot of my efforts at UMass Boston were controversial. When I created a program funded by the Ford Foundation that was focused on recognizing the research achievements of students who are not usually considered as researcher material, who were newly, on a more recent basis, strangers in the world of academia. So in the midst of some of the acrimony, I decided to appeal to Hubie, a man who I had not yet met, but whose social justice work had long been a source of inspiration to me. I don't remember what I expected to happen when I entered his office, but in that first encounter, we began a friendship that provided me with much needed support during a very contentious time, and also an opportunity to learn from what would turn out to be 16 years of advice and support that enabled the Student Awards program to survive. Hubie was a mentor to me and to the program. He wrote heartfelt and eloquent introductions to several published books and articles about the awards that acknowledge students as researchers. In one introduction that he wrote, he described our student researchers in our program as microcosms of hope in a sometimes dismal world. Hubie inspired a younger generation of undergraduates at UMass Boston since he spoke year after year at our annual banquets. He inspired them to believe that they too could produce research valued by other students and by scholars from UMass Boston and other institutions. Thanks to his unwavering support and counsel, this awards program eventually became a consortium of 7 New England area colleges and university. I don't know how much Huby knows about the degree to which these award winners benefited or inspired by his words of encouragement, or of how much he inspired and encouraged me. So Huby helped us UMass Boston students, and he helped me as a UMass Boston faculty member to feel like we belonged at an academic institution, that we could be a part of creating the knowledge that universities were supposed to create. So let me stop there and thank Huby again for the inspiration, for the support, for the mentorship that you provided to me and to so many students, and actually these students' parents at UMass Boston. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Esther Kingston, man. We greatly appreciate your tribute. Next up, we will have our award presentation by one of our current outstanding undergraduate student leaders, Ms. Kamaya Parkin.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cooper, for that warm introduction. Good evening, everyone. Everyone can hear me clear? Fine? Perfect. My name is Kamaya Parkin, and I am the president and founder of the NAACP College Chapter located on UMass Boston's campus. It is a distinct honor and privilege to be here this evening with all of you. This year, when we released the application for nominations of this award, I instantly received an overwhelming sea of emails, all stating very plainly, Huby Jones. It's not hard to imagine why he deserves to be honored. His track record is massive. Public servants, much like Huby Jones, have committed their lives to the values of social service for a simple reason: people matter. He stood the test of time to fight for low-income residents in a society that shames people for not having resources for a better life. He's been recognized as a national role model for his work in exposing accessibility issues in social work. And he's been a giant in ensuring that young Black boys and young Black girls get to have the same fighting chance when it comes to receiving education. As a proud product of Boston Public Schools myself, I am honored that we had truth seekers such as Huby Jones to fight for Black students' rights to an accessible education. I couldn't present this award without first honoring the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. Lin-Manuel Miranda, writer of the Broadway musical Hamilton, writes, "Legacy. What is a legacy? It's planting seeds in a garden you never get to see." You see, this is beautiful because in this instance, the planting is the preparation for new growth, for new space, new ideas of what is possible, the preparation of what's to come next, even if you aren't here to sow it yourself. And while Dr. King himself may not be here to see his legacy, I am most certain that he is looking down at the fruits of his garden, overjoyed of its plentiful bounty of motivated game changers. Now, I don't want you to think that this speech is solely on fruits and vegetables, because it's not. No, this is a speech honoring the importance of the word legacy. When our time comes and goes, what will be your legacy? What will people remember about you? How have you touched someone's life and made it that more bearable? Martin Luther King was a visionary of his time. His dreams have long survived decades of racial unrest and the challenge of status quos. But ever so often, we are blessed with the presence of strong-willed, noble, and kind leaders who pick up the baton to finish this race we call equality. Huby Jones, your unwavering commitment to social justice will continue to be felt beyond lifetimes. Opening doors is too modest to describe a true humanitarian like Huby. More accurately, he's shattered institutions that once scorned the faces that look like his and mine. I hope that one day I can make at least 1/5 of the impact that you have made in Boston. As a young girl born and raised in Boston, me, much like many others, will forever be in your debt. It is my honor that I, Kamaya Parkin, on behalf of the UMass Boston NAACP College Chapter, present Huby Jones with this year's MLK Living Legacy Award. And you will receive it in the mail.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you, Kamaya, and your colleagues for presenting me with the MLK Living Legacy Award. I also want to thank Tony Martin for the prodigious work he has done in making this event happen. Really appreciate it. This award named for Dr. King is very special to me for the following reason. On October 28th, 1956, I first saw and heard Dr. King live at the Ford Hall Forum in Boston at Jordan Hall. The power of his performance that night blew me away, and it sealed my commitment to personally work for social justice in the Boston community and beyond. It set me on the path to live a purpose-filled life. Of course, I have been fortunate to have Kathy Butler Jones, my wife of 63 years, to support me all the way. And tonight I want to thank Kathy for her enduring love and support, because most of what I have done could not have happened without her help. And I think some of you can see her. Here she is.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I have been fortunate to have been involved in the formation and leadership of at least 25 nonprofit organizations. People embellish it many times, but anyway, I've been very fortunate to play a role in the shaping and leadership of very important nonprofit service institutions. Absolutely nobody does anything alone. You really have to have partners. You have to have allies. You have to have people who believe that you are going to do the right thing and that you're going to stay the course. Listening to all of the folks who are speakers here and who have been not only mentees of mine, but who have been friends and they've been leaders really and models for me, has been a joy in my life. And I have been fortunate to be able to invest myself in the development of developing young people. I will say this to everybody here: always make yourself accessible to people who want to see you. There are too many people who have buffers. Am I still there? Can you still hear me? Okay. Am I still there? Oh, no. Hello?
Yes.
I'm still
We can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So people create buffer zones so you can't get access to them. You never know who's going to come in your door. Always give people access. Don't turn people away. And if you do that, you will find many people who can country and in the city. Make yourself available. All the people who spoke here tonight will attest to the fact that they didn't have to go through a whole lot of folks to have access to me. Okay, and that is how we should live. if you're a leader worth anything, you give access, you give support. Unfortunately, I've met a lot of folks who have just done amazing things. And all of them, many of them spoke here tonight. So I just want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank all of you for honoring me this way. And you know, you just keep doing it to your last breath. I have paid rent. I urge you to pay your rent. I will continue to pay my rent. For all of us who want to be helpful, for all of us who believe we are leaders, make sure we give everybody access to us, and that people don't have all kinds of buffer zones to reach us. When people do that, and helpful, and who can play a major role in building a better city and a better country. So thanks, everybody. You've been fabulous.
We want to thank you, Dean Jones, for your outstanding service, leadership, and sacrifice. The famous pioneer and civil rights activist Jackie Robinson said, "A life is not important except in the impact it has on others' lives." And it is clear throughout your life and your family's lives that you all have had an indelible impact, not only on the city of Boston, but on the world at large. We thank you, we honor you, and we love you. Like to say a few final thank yous to those who were involved in organizing this event. We'd like to thank Mr. Tony Martin for his tremendous leadership in organizing this event and bringing everyone together. We'd like to thank our co-sponsors, the UMass Boston chapter of the NAACP, the National Forum for Black Public Administrators, the Mauricio Gaston Institute, the Chancellor's Office, the Office of Student Affairs, the Office of Community Partnerships, and the Black Faculty, Staff, and Student Association. We'd also like to express a special thank you to Dr. Easter Shapiro and Dr. Charles Desmond for their exceptional dedication and mentorship with regards to the planning and execution of the event this evening. We hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you all for all the panelists for participating, and we look forward to continuing the legacy of Dean Jones through all that we do. We will conclude the night with some music from our IT staff. Thank you again.